What's up, guys? Welcome back to True Sound Studios. I'm Weezna. So today I'm going to show you guys me putting in all of the fiberglass insulation into that entire framing system that you saw. So all four walls and the entire acoustic cloud that is on the ceiling. So I'm going to be using two different, we'll call it types of insulation. It's really just the thickness. So the first one's going to be R15, and the R15 is going to go on all the walls except for the front wall. So both side walls and the back wall will get R15. And then the entire acoustic cloud in the ceiling here, that will all be R15 as well. And then I'm going to be using R30, which is much thicker. It's about 3 times the thickness. And that is going to go in the very front. And that is because the front has a minimum depth of 12 inches and a maximum depth of 30 inches. So we need much more insulation to put up front there. And so, of course, I'm using much thicker insulation, where all of the walls and the acoustic cloud in the ceiling are only 3.5 inches, which is why I'm using the R15. So once again, I am not putting drywall up on any of the framing, okay? So I'm literally just gonna put the insulation in, which you'll see in this video, and then I'm gonna cover it with fabric. And really from there, you could stop, you could bring in all your studio gear, and you'd have a really well-controlled control room or recording space or whatever you wanna call it. I'm, of course, gonna go a step further. I have these pipe insulation that I did on the side walls. I did the wood triangles on the front wall. There's some wood slats on the back, and on the sides, there's cabinetry. So I'm gonna go a little above and beyond that. But of course, that's your decision. I mean, you could just literally put up the insulation, cover it with the fabric, and call it done. Okay, guys, so with that being said, let's get into the insulation and fabricing of the new control room. Okay, so now it is time to install the fiberglass insulation, which is all the acoustic treatment for my studio. So if you'll notice, when I'm putting this in, number one, I'm trying to make sure that I keep it as fluffy as possible. I am not just going to jam this stuff into a space that might be a little smaller than the 16 on center because of extra lumber or something. I'm cutting to fit it because you want to keep this stuff as fluffy as possible, because it really will change the density of the insulation, which changes how well this stuff will actually do with absorbing sound. So here I'm working on the acoustic cloud. Now this acoustic cloud covers the entire ceiling of the studio, from the very, very front to the very back in both sides. Now, if you'll notice, I am cutting around, for example, the 2 lights and the smoke alarm. Now, the 2 lights is really the thing I want to talk about. You definitely want to check with the manufacturer or in the directions of your lights to see whether or not you can actually put this insulation right over the top of them. Some of them are rated so that you can put insulation on them, and some are not. And so I cut the little space out for those lights to make sure they can nicely disperse the heat. Now, right behind the studio door is a much thinner panel. It's actually only 1.5 inches thick. I'll show you guys what I do to that later on. Okay, so on to the other side of the studio, working on the acoustic cloud on the right side here where I covered up that window. So whatever you're gonna do, just try your best to make it as symmetrical as possible. So whatever you're gonna be doing to the right side of the studio, make sure you do the same thing to the left. You don't want, when you start doing measurements of your room, to have more reflections on one side or more absorption on the other side, because that is going to create an imbalance, and then everything is going to sound slightly different, whether something is panned all the way to the left or all the way to the right. Okay, so we're going to get back to this insulation. Now, I talked about using R15 on both the side walls, the back wall, and the big acoustic cloud in the ceiling. But I was unable to buy what is known as unfaced R15 insulation. So what I was forced to buy, because unfortunately all the big box stores in the area only carried R15 faced insulation. So faced insulation is the one that has the paper on the one side of the insulation, which acts as a vapor barrier. Now, because this is already a finished space, it has painted drywall. that painted drywall acts as a moisture barrier. So what we don't want to do is have our painted drywall and then put an insulation with another vapor barrier. What we could do is potentially trap moisture in between that 3.5 inches and create some sort of issue, with mold or moisture issues. So what I'm going to do is take all that R15 faced insulation and actually essentially rip off that paper on almost 15 rolls that I bought. Now, it's not the ideal situation, but nobody carried unfaced R15 insulation. And if I wanted to order it, it was going to be like multiple weeks to even get it here. And it was like double to triple the cost. So I just went with the R15, put in the 45 minutes to take off all the paper. If you want to do this, of course, it's an option. Otherwise, you can just buy unfaced R15 insulation to do the same thing that I did here. So if you are going to peel off this vapor barrier or the facing on this insulation, this is all I did. Just open this up. I just used the longest side of my studio so you could roll out a bunch of this insulation all at once. And then you just take that paper and peel it off. Now, it's nice if you kind of get that bent to like a 180-degree angle. Kind of helps take that paper off a little easier. And then all I did is I just unrolled it. Sometimes some of that insulation sticks to the backside of that paper. The backside of that paper has tar on it, which is another reason why I'm wearing gloves. I'm also just super allergic to this stuff. It makes me crazy itchy. But eventually, if you just use your knee like I'm doing there, fold back that paper, you can kind of just unroll this insulation. It actually comes off fairly well and doesn't really leave a lot of that insulation behind on the paper. And so here is the end result. This is me taking off multiple rolls of this R15, taking that vapor barrier off, that facing, and now all this is truly ready to be put up. So now this is the R30 insulation. This is what I'm going to be using only on the front wall. And you can see there it says unfaced to the right, and below it, it is 9.2 inches thick. So essentially it's 3 times the size or the thickness of the R15 insulation. And what I'm doing here is I'm rolling it out because they, really compress this stuff in the bag. It's nice to get it out and kind of let it fluff itself up so it can get to that 9.25 thickness. If you just put it up right away, it's gonna struggle to get to that thickness. And we really want that because that is truly what's gonna help absorb all this sound that we're trying to do here, especially in these corners. We have 30-inch corners. We're gonna use multiple layers of this R30 insulation to build our bass traps. Also, if you'll notice, while I'm putting all this up, I'm actually using a pair of scissors to cut all this. Now, I know some people use a utility knife, but I think a good pair of sharp scissors is actually a lot easier, especially when you get around to outlets and things you got to work around. It actually is just a lot easier to cut through it. Now, once again, I'm going to stress the importance of having symmetry. So the amount of insulation I'm putting on the left side, I'm making sure to match that to the right-hand side. It's really important. I don't want one side to be unbalanced to the other. And then finally, I'm just using some more R15 to fill in those voids in the very front there on the 2x4s. So of course, this is just a part of the series. Go back and check out part 1 where I did all the framing, part 2 where I did all the wiring, and now part 3 with the installation and fabric. But not only do I, build these studios, I mix and master full time. So if you guys are looking to work on a project together, all my info is in the description box down below or on my website, tssrecording.com, and we can link up and work on a project together. Okay, so now it is time to put in the fabric, and I'm going to show you guys what I used to make this a lot easier and the actual fabric that I used. So first up is the staples. These are nothing special. These are just arrow staples. They are 3/8 long, and that is plenty long enough to be able to hang fabric with. Now this Ryobi battery-powered staple gun saves your hand when you got to put in a couple 5,000-10,000 staples in a studio, it makes it so much easier than the manual one, I guess you would say. And then for the fabric, for almost all the fabric I use in the studio, I'm using these. These are Walmart Mainstays sheets. You want to make sure you get the flat ones. The fitted sheets have elastic in them. You don't want those. Queen and king are definitely, the best sizes, at least I've found, for your standard studio. Now here's a little cheat code I did. If you're gonna see some of the staples or you're not sure if you'll see them, you can just take a Sharpie marker and just literally color in the back side of the staple, which is what you see after you put it in. And this way, you don't have to look at this silver staple. It kind of blends in a little bit more with this little trick. Now, just one other thing that I thought of after I did this, instead of coloring in these staples with the Sharpie marker, you could just buy a can of spray paint. I used black and white fabric. I could have bought black or white spray paint and just spray painted the back sides of the staples so that when I put them up, they look nice. So just another option that you could do. Okay, so on to fabric installation. Now, this is how I do it. I'm right-handed, so I have the staple gun in my right hand, and therefore I start at the top right corner with that nice factory edge of that fabric. I put the staples in, I'm pulling with my left hand and following the staple gun with my right. This way you can pull and put staples in at the same time and try to avoid any of those wrinkles. So what I'm using here is I'm using my laser. Now I use the laser to shoot a line on the wall where I don't want to put staples. So essentially from there over to the right, I don't want to put any staples. Otherwise you will see them. It's a space where, it isn't going to be covered by something. So I like to use the laser for that. So after you put the staples up on the very top and you pull all the top nice and tight, then you're just going to start working your way down and to the left. Once again, just pulling all the way to the left and down at the same time. These bed sheets are really nice because they're very stretchy. They have a lot of elasticity to them. And so it allows you to pull the fabric, get rid of those wrinkles as you're putting the staples in. Now, another thing that's really important is you can see I'm pulling through all those wires as I'm doing this. And that's because I don't want to leave those behind there and put in all the staples and then pull them through later on. Chances are it will create some wrinkles. Okay, so I did go to the fabric store and I bought these fabric scissors, but these have a sharp little point on them. And they're really nice because they're small little scissors. So it allows you to cut through like this overlap that goes over the floor. It's just one of those things that my wife told me I should buy and actually turned out to be kind of useful. Also in a case like this, where, I fabriced over an outlet, I put the staples in and now I need to cut around it. These have a sharp little point on it, so you can just like stab it through the fabric and cut them out. It's a little cheat code that I found that my wife was right about. So figured I have to pass it on, but this is what it looks like with one of the outlets after, it's been fabriced and I put the outlet plate on there. Now, one of the reasons why I'm going to put up the fabric over all of that insulation that I put in, even though I'm going to cover it with something else, is just like in the last studio build that I had, I did 2 layers of fabric, and that's because, insulation, whether it's rock wool or it's fiberglass, is made up of small little particles. I have bad asthma. I have seasonal allergies. So this stuff's always bugging me. And so for me, it's just a little extra layer of protection to put up. So I wrap it all with just standard bed sheets, except for the ceiling. I went with a different fabric, but we'll talk about that a little later. But then I cover all those bed sheets with essentially something else. And it just gives me, just a little bit more protection to stop from some of those fibers from becoming airborne and breathe them in and creating some potential issues. So it's just one of the things I do. You don't necessarily have to do it, but it's what I'm doing. Okay, so in total, I used 12 bags of the R15 insulation, which is 15 inches wide, 3.5 inches thick, and 32 feet long per roll. I used a total of 384 feet of that R15, totaling $267. Then for the R30, I used 4 bags of the R30 just on the front wall. That's 15 inches wide, 9¼ inches thick, and 25 feet long per roll. I used 100 feet total of the R30 at $194 just for the R30. So then all 16 bags of insulation for this first round of insulation cost me $461, and that does include tax. So the last space that I needed to treat was behind the studio door. So this is the spot that's only 1.5 inches thick. You can see right there, that is the front of the studio where the window is. So we are in the back left-hand corner. So what I would traditionally use is, standard insulation, but because this is so thin, I wasn't able to. So what I did use was 1.5 inches thick memory foam topper. Now this is probably not going to absorb really anything but some mids and highs, but it is better than nothing. Okay guys, so finally wrapped the studio in the first layer of fabric. Now, most of the walls are actually getting covered, but this is kind of like the backdrop for the things that I'm doing because you will be able to see through a little bit. And, I just wanted like a solid color behind things. So anyways, the very front of the wall is going to be all wrapped in these like triangular wood shaped things I'm going to put on. There will be slight gaps and it'll be LED lit. So I did put fabric on it. You can see right through it. You can see all the studs in there. Once again, this is all bed sheets. And then one more thing that I have to fix. Now, from the very start, you can see that's the center of the room right there, and the window is offset. So if you guys noticed in the framing, I had to put like an extra piece of lumber over here. So I'm going to make that up with the acoustic treatment that goes over it, but kind of drives me a little insane, but that's okay. So the front's done, and you can see I got wall plates on, at least temporarily. These gold wall plate ones are that separate lighting circuit that I talked about in the other video, and just wanted to make it obvious to myself so I don't forget. So I just made those gold. Then if we look at the side walls, once again, you will pretty much won't see any of the black, but because of what I'm doing, even if you did see through a little bit, I just wanted there to be some fabric in there so that you wouldn't see through to just blank insulation. Except this little side sliver thing, that you actually will see. Now, I will have to trim it. You can see some, just raw lumber up there. I'm going to do like some wood strips on this back wall. Just, you guys will see eventually. And then this entire back wall, you won't see any of the fabric except for in between these two cabinets. The cabinets go all the way up to the ceiling, and then there's a cabinet that kind of like cuts across the top. So like this whole section here, you will see, and you can see I didn't put any staples in this part of the fabric, because you're actually going to see all this. Once again, though, I am going to put a diffuser back in this section here, so we'll cover a lot of it, but not all of it. And then this is the other side wall. It's exactly the same. This is where all these tube traps are going. They're going in front of all this black here, so it'll pretty much, it's almost like the whole width of this. So anyways, I'll show you guys that in a little bit. And then you can see the ceiling looks terrible. Because I used a really light fabric, and that is because last time I did a weed control fabric. So I essentially did 2 layers of fabric on the ceiling so that some of that fiberglass particles don't drop down and breathe them in. So this is layer 1, and this is where I stapled all in the middle and just put a ton of staples trying to hold all that insulation up, even though the insulation stayed up there really, really well. And then I'm gonna put another layer of fabric over this, totally different. It's almost got kind of like a design weave to it. And that's gonna be my finished fabric, and that is much, much thicker than this, and you won't see all these ugly staples and whatever and holes. So all my lights are cut out. Here though, this is a speaker, kind of for Atmos overhead. And then I still got to put the vent cover for the HVAC in. But so that's where I am as of right now. And then I got one more thing to do. Up here is going to be some lumber they got to fill in, and I got to get just a smidge more insulation to fill this like top section. But I'm putting computer monitors up here for the security system, so I just wasn't sure. I finally made a decision, and now I gotta finish it up. Okay, so that video with everything cleared out and all the bed sheets up is really how I left everything. Of course, we're gonna get to all the rest of the stuff I do, but the only thing I didn't film, and that's only because I put it in much later on, is all this second layer of fabric that went on the ceiling to cover up all that kind of lighter white first layer of fabric I put up. Now that fabric that I put up as the second finished layer on the ceiling is called monk's cloth. My wife, once again, my wife really helps out with all the design of the studio and of course the house. She is truly the designer. I'm definitely more of the builder, although I push for the triangles on the front here. But anyways, sorry. So this monk's cloth on the top looks really good. Like, it looks so nice. It is a super high-end fabric. It was also very expensive. But it has these like weaves in it. I call it like a basket weave. And the problem is after you cut it to length or width, it started to unravel. And so I had to put a ton of extra staples in there. I wasn't planning on doing that. And then therefore you can see like there's some trim I had to put in because I also couldn't buy it long enough to span the whole studio. Okay, so now that you guys have seen all the fabric, let me go over the numbers on how much money I spent. So it was $165 for all of the bed sheets that I bought. The ceiling fabric, that monk's cloth, that second layer that I put up on the ceiling, that alone was $122 to cover this entire ceiling. Now, once again, the room is 12 by 14, so it's a pretty big space to cover up there. And then the fabric that I'll show you guys later on that I used to cover the half rounds only, that was $88. And then the last piece of fabric, I guess you would say, is this like fake leather that I used on the armrest, and that was $26. So not too terrible considering, you know, how much fabric I did have to put up in this space. Not saying that bed sheets is always the cheapest thing. At one point, bed sheets was definitely the cheapest fabric you could buy. So guys, that is it for this video. Of course, check the other previous videos out if you guys want to see how we got to this phase. And then of course, I still got a lot more to do. Like I was mentioning, I'm going to show you guys how I did literally all of this. I've built everything myself. So these are all videos that are going to be coming up in the future. So if you guys have questions, please leave them down below. Also, another great way to get a hold of me is on Instagram. Go ahead and find True Sound Studios, shoot me a DM. I respond back to everybody. It might take me a day or two, but like I said, I respond back to every single person. And of course, if you guys are looking for mixing and mastering, shoot me an email, a message on Instagram, or drop a comment down below. All right, guys, thanks again for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.